On a moonless night in June 1944, a German sentry named Klaus Weber pressed himself against the cold stone of his observation post along the Luxembourg border, straining to hear through the darkness. What reached his ears made his heart hammer against his ribs. The unmistakable growl of German tanks, 1 or 2 dozens of them, the grinding of treads against stone echoed across the valley. Metal clanked against metal, voices barked orders in English. Heavy truck engines roared to life. One after another, Weber's hands trembled as he reached for the field telephone. Intelligence had assured them the Americans were stretched thin in this sector, but his ears, trained through 2 years of combat to recognize the acoustic signature of approaching armor, told him something entirely different. An entire armored division was moving into position, and they were getting closer. Within minutes, the German defensive machinery sprang to life. Artillery crews scrambled from their sleeping quarters, racing to man their guns. Officers emerged from command posts, maps unfurling in their hands. Radio operators transmitted urgent warnings up the chain of command. Massive American buildup detected. Assault imminent. Request immediate reinforcements. The sounds continued throughout the long night, the metallic symphony of war preparation, growing louder, then softer, then louder again as phantom units maneuvered in the darkness at first light. Weber raised his binoculars with exhausted eyes, scanning the terrain. Empty fields. No tanks, no vehicles, not even tracks in the mud, just silence, and eerie silence that made the hair rise on his neck. They weren't imagining things. Artillery had fired at where the sounds originated. Patrols had been sent, yet morning revealed nothing. What Weber heard wasn't a real armored division. It was something entirely new in warfare. Sonic deception created by the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. The Ghost Army. Their phantom tanks were crafted by the 3132nd Signal Service Company Special, a unit that had achieved something extraordinary. They weaponized sound itself. The story doesn't start in Europe. It starts in the labs of Bell Laboratories, where engineers and artists explored radical new approaches to deception. If you could fool the eye with dummy tanks, why not the ear? Modern warfare was loud. Soldiers learned to identify engines, artillery, armor, even unit types by sound alone. For German troops, these skills were second nature. Someone asked, what if we make them hear an entire army that isn't there? Bell Labs took the challenge. Their teams deployed to bases and battlefields. They captured the acoustic signatures of American machines with unmatched detail. Tanks, half-tracks, bulldozers, artillery. But recording wasn't enough. They had to understand how sound traveled, how forests absorbed it, how hills reflected it, how humidity bent it. Everything mattered. One wrong acoustic detail could expose the deception. Their goal wasn't to record a sound, it was to record war itself. Bell Labs created playback systems so powerful they pushed engineering limits. Massive speakers mounted on half-tracks capable of producing sound as loud as a modern jet at close range. These weren't simple speakers, they were directional, able to project sound across a mile while making it seem like it originated from somewhere completely different. The true artistry lay in the recordings. Bell Labs didn't create isolated sound clips, they created sonic films, full soundscapes of armored divisions moving, engines accelerating, slowing, idling, bulldozers clearing ground, crews shouting over the clank of tools, supplies being lowered off trucks, metal scraping metal. Real operations had rhythm, patterns, and soldiers knew those patterns instinctively to fool them. Bell Labs had to replicate that rhythm flawlessly. By 1944, the equipment and recordings were ready. Now they needed operators. The Army recruited 145 men from radio stations, recording studios, sound labs. They were not traditional soldiers. Most had never held a rifle, but they were experts in what mattered. Acoustics. They formed the 3132nd Signal Service Company, special part of the 23rd Headquarters, Special Troops, the Ghost Army. Visual deception teams built inflatable tanks and planes, indistinguishable from real equipment at a distance. Radio deception units broadcast fake transmissions. Artists painted shadows, tire tracks, motor pools that didn't exist, and now the sonic teams would make fake armies sound real. They landed in France. In summer 1944, the front stretched thin. Real divisions were struggling to push east. Commanders needed illusions, phantom forces to mislead German intelligence. The first mission came fast. A sector of the line was dangerously exposed. Real American troops were concentrating elsewhere. The 3132nd had to fill the gap with sound. They moved under darkness, half-tracks crawling toward the front, often closer to Germans than to Americans. The massive speaker arrays were barely camouflaged, but at night, hidden among trees, they became ghosts. 10 p.m. They pressed play. Across no man's land thundered the sound of tanks, Shermans maneuvering in the dark, grinding treads, gears shifting, engines roaring, trucks unloading equipment, crews shouting. The operators adjusted volume, monitored equipment. They couldn't see the Germans. They couldn't know if the deception was working. Then German artillery opened fire. Shells exploded exactly where the phantom tanks were. They were being shelled. They couldn't stop. Stopping would shatter the illusion, so they stayed at their posts under artillery fire, continuing the performance at dawn. They vanished. Days later, intelligence confirmed it. German reinforcements had moved. Units had repositioned. Entire defensive plans were adjusted, all responding to sound that wasn't real. As autumn approached, the Ghost Army ran mission after mission, each one uniquely dangerous. They operated in a strange role, technicians in a war zone, not infantry, not armor, but close enough to be shelled, captured, or killed. They often worked forward of American lines. They carried no heavy weapons. Their protection was camouflage and darkness. Darkness mission planning became an art. They studied every hill, valley, forest, and road. Where would sound travel? Where would it echo? Where would it die? They gained an intuitive understanding of battlefield acoustics. They coordinated tightly with visual and radio deception. Inflatable tanks where scouts could spot them. Fake radio chatter where Germans could intercept it. Multisensory deception. You hear tanks. You see tanks. You intercept tank transmissions. The illusion becomes unbreakable, but unlike normal soldiers, sonic operators saw no immediate results. They created illusions, then disappeared. Confirmation, if any, came days or weeks later through intelligence reports or prisoner interrogations. In October 1944, near Luxembourg, they executed one of their boldest operations. American forces were preparing a major offensive, but the line elsewhere was dangerously weak. The Ghost Army had to create the illusion of a massive buildup where none existed. Visual teams placed dummy armor. Radio teams broadcast fake chatter. The sonic team created the sound of engineers preparing a river crossing, bridges assembling, metal clanking, trucks arriving, artillery being positioned. Night after night the illusion grew. German intelligence reported Americans preparing major offensive. This sector, reinforcements required. And the Germans moved exactly where the Allies wanted them, because the real attack was 50 miles away when it hit. German forces were out of place, unprepared, and destabilized. The sonic deception saved lives. December 1944. The Battle of the Bulge. Germany launched a massive surprise attack. The front shattered. Chaos erupted. In the confusion, deception operations became extremely dangerous. The Ghost Army found itself operating in shifting front lines, sometimes with Germans unknowingly bypassing American positions. Their role changed. Instead of creating phantom divisions, they now masked retreats. As American troops fell back, sonic teams made it sound like units were still entrenched, buying precious time, delaying German pursuit. Winter punished equipment. The snow muffled sound. Ice cracked wires. Cold strained amplifiers. But the missions continued, because without deception, the thin American lines risked collapse. March 1945. The Rhine River, the last major barrier before Germany. The Allies needed the Germans to believe the crossing would occur in several false locations. The 3132nd created the acoustic illusion of boat engines. Engineering preparations. Infantry movements all at incorrect crossing points. Germans reinforced the wrong areas. The real crossing succeeded faster and with fewer casualties. Another deception victory. By late March, the Ghost Army conducted its final mission. 21 major operations. Countless German units deceived. Thousands of lives likely saved, and every success achieved with nothing but recordings, speakers, and creativity. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the 3132nd was immediately deactivated. Their strange, powerful weapon was boxed up, classified, and forgotten. The men returned to civilian life: sound engineers, radio operators, artists, but they could not speak of what they had done. Everything was top secret. They carried their stories silently for decades. Official WWII histories mentioned tank battles, infantry assaults, artillery duels, but nothing about the Ghost Army, nothing about phantom divisions or sonic deception. The men who fooled the German army left no trace in public memory. Until the 1980s. Documents were declassified. Veterans finally spoke. Historians listened, and the world learned the truth. People were stunned. It sounded like science fiction. Speakers projecting sound a mile away. Recordings indistinguishable from reality. Fake armies made from air and ingenuity. But it was real. The technology was revolutionary for its time. But the true story wasn't about machines, it was about imagination. The Ghost Army proved a fundamental truth. In war, what the enemy believes can be more important than what actually exists. Modern warfare absorbed that lesson. Radar spoofing, electronic deception, cyber operations, false signals, decoy systems, different tools, same principle: control perception, control decisions, control the battlefield. The sonic deception of 1944 was primitive compared to today's systems, but it exploited something timeless: human psychology. German commanders heard exactly what they expected: armored movements, engineers preparing bridges, supply chains forming, their brains filled in the rest. The deception didn't require them to believe the impossible, only the logical. In 2013, a PBS documentary brought the Ghost Army's story to millions. In 2022, Congress awarded the unit the Congressional Gold Medal. Decades late, but meaningful recognition. Historians still debate the precise impact. Exact numbers are unknowable, but documented evidence is clear. German forces repeatedly reacted to phantom threats. They moved units, repositioned artillery, wasted fuel, redirected reinforcements, all due to illusions created by speakers. Conservative estimates suggest hundreds or even thousands of Allied lives were saved, not by firepower, not by bullets, but by deception. The sonic warfare window was brief. It existed only because technology, battlefield conditions, and enemy vulnerabilities aligned perfectly. Modern sensors would detect such deceptions instantly, but the principles endure. Deception works best when it reinforces what the enemy already believes. The Ghost Army didn't ask German commanders to believe fantasies. They asked them to believe something entirely plausible, something they already feared. American armored dominance. The success of the 3132nd also highlights the importance of cross-disciplinary innovation. The unit wasn't built from traditional soldiers. It was built from sound designers, acousticians, artists, and electrical engineers, people who understood sound not just as noise, but as narrative, as emotion, as perception. Their skills allowed them to create illusions as immersive as cinema. Only their audience was the German High Command. The Ghost Army's deception operations also revealed the importance of multi-sensory coordination. Sonic deception alone was powerful, but when combined with visual and radio deception, it became overwhelming. German intelligence operated on multiple channels: sight, sound, intercepted radio, reports from the field. When all channels aligned, each delivering the same false impression, the deception became irresistible. This principle forms the core of modern disinformation and psychological warfare. As war evolved into the digital age, the methods changed, but the philosophy did not. Cyber deception, electronic spoofing, and false intelligence signals all owe conceptual roots to what the Ghost Army pioneered with tape recorders and speakers. The sonic deception program also forced military planners to confront a deeper question: how much of warfare is perception rather than reality? If an army can be made to believe a phantom division exists, that belief alone may change the battle outcome. The German troops heard tanks. They believed tanks were present. They repositioned forces. They wasted artillery shells. They prepared for an assault that never came. The tanks didn't have to exist. Their belief in them did. This was the real genius of the Ghost Army. As historians studied the newly revealed documents, they recognized that the Ghost Army's innovations extended far beyond recordings. The entire deception architecture was meticulously designed to exploit cognitive biases, enemy overconfidence, and acoustic intelligence assumptions about American logistics, patterns of expected movement, predictable German defensive doctrine, the tendency to trust multiple confirming signals. Ghost Army built illusions that aligned with all of those expectations. Operations also provided insight into the emotional and psychological state of German forces in late 1944 and early 1945, exhausted, and increasingly aware that the war was turning against them. German soldiers were especially vulnerable to illusions of overwhelming American strength. Hearing phantom armored divisions was demoralizing. Hearing engineers preparing bridges meant another river crossing was coming. Hearing supply chains meant the Americans had endless resources. To tired soldiers, low on fuel and ammunition, the sound of American mobility was terrifying. The sonic deception exploited that fear. As the story gained public attention, survivors of the Ghost Army, now in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, finally had the chance to share what they had done. Many described their experiences with a mix of pride and disbelief. They had been ordinary young men, suddenly thrust into a role no one had ever played before. One veteran said, "We fought with speakers instead of rifles, but make no mistake, we were fighting." Another recalled the fear of operating forward of friendly lines. The Germans were so close we could smell their cooking, and were there blasting tank engines at full volume. Their missions were dangerous. Their equipment attracted attention. Artillery often targeted the sounds they created. One lucky hit could have destroyed the entire deception team. Yet they continued, night after night, because their weapon illusion, a single interruption could break the spell. The Ghost Army proved that sometimes the safest move for a soldier is to deceive the enemy into fighting shadows instead of real men.
The Rhine crossing operation in March 1945 became the Ghost Army's masterpiece. By then, the unit had mastered not only the technical elements of sonic deception, but also the psychological and tactical aspects. They created multiple false crossing points, each supported by sonic illusions of boat engines, fake engineering sounds, dummy bridging equipment, simulated troop concentrations, false radio traffic, and decoy lighting setups at night. The Germans reacted exactly as planned. They strengthened defenses where the Americans pretended to be preparing a crossing. This thinned out their defenses at the actual crossing point, allowing the Allies to overwhelm the real sector more quickly. This operation alone likely saved hundreds of American lives. But the Sonic unit didn't know this at the time. They simply packed up their equipment and moved on, unsure whether their illusions had worked until intelligence confirmation arrived days later. After the war ended, the U.S. military evaluated the Ghost Army's performance. The conclusion was clear. The deception program was extraordinarily successful. Among the findings, German units were deceived in nearly every documented operation. Enemy forces repositioned in response to phantom threats. Artillery fire was repeatedly wasted on empty ground. Reserves were committed against illusions. Strategic decisions were influenced by fabricated intelligence. Allied operations benefited from enemy misjudgment. Lives were saved as a direct result of deception. The military concluded that the Ghost Army provided a force multiplier effect, an amplification of American strength without using additional combat troops. Yet almost no one knew. While frontline units received medals, newspaper coverage, and historical acclaim, the Ghost Army faded into classified files. Their accomplishments remained hidden behind secrecy. Only decades later would the world learn what they had done. When the story finally emerged, it raised profound questions about warfare, truth, and perception. Military theorists recognized that the Ghost Army's work represented a turning point. The battlefield was no longer purely physical. It was informational, cognitive, psychological. The Ghost Army didn't need to destroy enemy forces. They needed only to shape enemy expectations. By controlling what German commanders heard, saw, and intercepted, they controlled how those commanders made decisions. The sonic operators essentially hijacked the enemy's decision-making process. This idea became central to modern doctrines like information warfare, psychological operations, electronic deception, cyber operations, and electromagnetic spectrum manipulation. The Ghost Army wasn't just ahead of its time, it was a preview of warfare's future. Their operations also highlighted an important truth about deception. The best lies are the ones that reinforce what the listener already believes. German forces already expected Americans to be strong, mobile, and well-supplied. The sonic illusions confirmed those expectations. Confirmation bias did the rest. Even now, the story has broader implications. In an era of deepfakes, information manipulation, and data warfare, the Ghost Army serves as an early example of how powerful artificial reality can be long before digital technology existed. The men of the 3132nd had only speakers, amplifiers, and magnetic tape, but they achieved effects that modern militaries spend billions trying to replicate digitally. Their success was not due to technology alone, but to imagination. The epilogue of the Ghost Army story is as haunting as the phantom tanks themselves. For decades, the men who created the illusions lived quietly. Many never even told their families. They watched documentaries about the war that omitted their contributions. They read books about battles they influenced but were never credited for. Some carried classified memories until the day they died. When recognition finally came, surviving veterans expressed a mix of pride and melancholy. They were proud of what they had done, but they also understood that their unique role was a product of a specific moment in time, never to be repeated. Modern warfare has moved on. High-tech sensors, satellite surveillance, and multispectrum detection make traditional sonic deception nearly impossible. But the Ghost Army's legacy remains deeply relevant, because it revealed something timeless. War is not only about strength, it is about perception, morale, belief, expectation. A phantom tank can be as influential as a real one, if the enemy believes it exists. When Klaus Weber heard those phantom Shermans rumbling through darkness, his fear was real. The German artillery fired at empty fields. German reinforcements moved. Defensive lines shifted. Plans changed. None of it required a single real tank. Just sound. Just illusion. Just human psychology. The soldiers of the 3132nd fought a war of perception, a war where victory meant creating silence where battle might have erupted, or creating noise where none existed. They were silent warriors who proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon on the battlefield is not steel, fire, or explosives, but belief. And that the deadliest weapon of all is the one your enemy never sees coming.